It was the day everything changed, and I didn't even see it coming. My name is Elliot Sayers. I'm a 34-year-old software developer in a nondescript office in a city that prides itself on being just another dot on the map. No one outside this place knows my name. And honestly, I preferred it that way. My life wasn't special. It wasn't bad either. I kept to myself, worked my 9 to 5, and went home to my modest apartment. My routine was predictable, and I liked it. I don't do well with surprises. But, as it turned out, I didn't have a choice when a surprise found me. It all started with an email. The kind of email that usually gets lost in the clutter of your inbox, marked urgent, with an invitation to a corporate event. Now, don't get me wrong, I knew the drill. Every year, my company would throw one of these mandatory events. I'd show up, eat bad food, pretend to be social, and then leave early. No one really cared about the event itself. It was all about appearances. But this year, it was different. The email wasn't from HR, as expected. It came from her, Amara Monroe. Now, most people in the office didn't even know who Amara was. She wasn't part of my department or any department I'd ever worked with. In fact, I only ever saw her on rare occasions in the hallway, her sharp gaze never making contact with anyone, like she was always a step ahead of everyone else. She wasn't one of those office stars who was always at the center of everything, yet there was a kind of presence about her that I couldn't quite shake off. And on that particular day, she had sent me an email. It read, "Elliot, I've been watching your work closely. We need people who understand precision. The company party is next week. You'll want to attend. I'll explain more there. Amara Monroe." I sat staring at the screen. I hadn't worked directly with Amara, and truthfully, I had no idea why she would even think to reach out to me. Was this some kind of mistake? Or, as usual, was I about to be dragged into something I didn't want to be a part of? But here's the thing. I didn't have the guts to ignore it. It's not that I cared about the event itself. In fact, I had already planned on not going, as I always did. But this felt different. I wasn't sure why, but something about her words made my pulse quicken. She didn't seem like the type to waste time. If she was inviting me, it was for a reason. I hesitated, then clicked accept on the invite. My finger lingered on the mouse, but I couldn't bring myself to hit decline. The night of the event arrived quicker than I expected. My apartment felt smaller than usual as I dressed in a dark suit. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew it wouldn't be ordinary. It wasn't about the free food, the mandatory socializing, or the dull conversations that would fill the night. There was something about this invitation that felt like it was leading to something pivotal. When I arrived at the venue, a sleek, modern hotel ballroom that reeked of corporate money, I immediately regretted my decision. The space was crowded with people I didn't know. There was the usual buzz of polite laughter, half-hearted greetings, and the background hum of clinking glasses. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a perfect view of the city skyline, but all I could focus on was the fact that I didn't belong here. I scanned the room. It was the kind of environment where everyone was pretending to be someone else. The cliques, the forced smiles, the cold handshakes. It wasn't my world. Then, across the room, I saw her. Amara Monroe wasn't what I had expected. She wasn't standing on a pedestal or talking to a group of people, as I had imagined. She was alone, standing by a quiet corner of the room, almost as though she was waiting for someone, but no one was approaching her. I didn't know why, but my legs moved toward her. Maybe it was the way she was standing there, so still, so calculated. Or maybe it was just my usual tendency to slip into the shadows, to observe, and to not interact unless absolutely necessary. But tonight, I was going to act on impulse for once. I approached her, trying to keep my nerves in check. "Amara?" I asked, though it wasn't really a question. More like a statement, a way to grab her attention. She turned to me, her eyes locking with mine for the briefest of moments. It was like she was analyzing me, assessing my every move. But there was something behind her gaze, something that told me she wasn't just looking at me. She was looking through me. Yes. Her voice was quiet, almost casual, but I could tell she wasn't one for small talk. "I got your email," I said, fumbling for words. "About the party. You said you wanted to talk?" She didn't smile. She didn't even nod. Instead, she simply said, "Come with me." Without waiting for a response, she turned and started walking toward a door at the far end of the ballroom. I didn't know why, but I followed her. Maybe it was the intrigue, or maybe it was the strange pull I felt toward her. But I wasn't about to back out now. I had already crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. I didn't question it. As she walked ahead, I was left with a strange feeling of unease, but also curiosity, an emotion I hadn't felt in ages. I wasn't the kind of person who sought out mystery or drama. I was perfectly fine with my quiet, predictable life. Yet something about Amara Monroe had thrown me off course. The way she looked at me, like she knew something I didn't, like she was seeing through the surface, was unsettling. We walked through a series of corridors, each one more isolated than the last. The hum of the party faded, replaced by the distant sound of footsteps echoing off polished floors. I tried to make sense of the situation. Why was she pulling me away from the crowd? What did she want from me? Where are we going? I asked, my voice low, though I wasn't sure why I was whispering. Amara didn't answer right away. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor, rhythmic and confident, like she was in control of the situation. Finally, she glanced over her shoulder. Patience, Elliot. You'll see soon enough. My mind raced, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led into something I had no idea how to handle. My fingers twitched slightly at my sides. I wasn't exactly a people person, let alone someone who sought out power struggles. I avoided confrontations at all costs, preferring to keep my head down and blend in. Yet here I was, walking behind this woman I barely knew, being led into the unknown. She stopped in front of an unmarked door at the end of a narrow hallway. It was so subtle, it could have easily been overlooked. I had walked past it earlier without even noticing it, assuming it was just part of the hotel's maintenance rooms. But now, it felt like the door to another world entirely. A world that wasn't supposed to be accessed by ordinary people like me. Amara opened the door with a fluid motion, stepping aside to let me in first. After you. I hesitated. There was nothing particularly ominous about the room, at least, not on the surface. It was dimly lit, with sleek, modern furniture arranged in a way that made it feel like a private lounge. The air was different here, though. It wasn't just a regular hotel room. There was a tension in the space, a feeling of something hidden just beneath the surface. Something I was about to uncover. The door closed softly behind me, sealing off the noise of the party completely. For a moment, all I could hear was the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Amara didn't speak, but she didn't need to. I could feel the weight of her presence in the room. It was as if she was waiting for me to make the next move. And I did. I stepped farther into the room, my eyes scanning for any sign of what was going on. The walls were adorned with abstract art, bold strokes of color that seemed to shift under the low light. The furniture was minimal, a few couches and a coffee table, but there was something about it that felt deliberate, intentionally sparse, like a place meant for something else. What is this place? I asked, unable to keep the question in. What's going on? Amara leaned against the wall, her eyes fixed on me with an unreadable expression. This is where the real decisions are made. I frowned, trying to understand. The real decisions? Was she talking about the company? Or was this something more personal? Before I could ask further, the door opened again, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, his features sharp and calculating. His presence immediately commanded attention. There was something cold about him, something that made my stomach drop the moment I saw him. Ah, Elliot, you're here. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, like he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. He offered a hand, but it was the kind of handshake that made you wonder if he was testing you, measuring you. I'm Marcus Langley. I shook his hand, unsure of how to respond. I had no idea who he was, but there was something in his eyes that told me he wasn't just some corporate figurehead. He was part of something bigger, something dangerous. Amara stood up straight, her eyes still locked on me. Marcus here is a valuable partner of ours. He and I work on certain projects. Projects that involve people who understand the finer details of things. She glanced at me, her lips curving into a faint smile. People like you. My mind raced. What the hell was going on? I was just a guy who wrote code. I didn't have any business being in a room like this, surrounded by people who seemed to operate on a different level altogether. I glanced at Marcus, who was now leaning against the wall with an almost bored expression. You must be wondering why you're here, he said, as though he could read my thoughts. Truth is, we've been watching you, Elliot. You're good at what you do. Very good. But there's more we could offer you. More than your current job could ever provide. I swallowed hard. I don't understand. What are you offering? Amara spoke before Marcus could. We're offering you a choice. She paused for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. The world you know? The world you've been living in? It's small, predictable, but we can show you something bigger. Something that goes beyond lines of code and corporate nonsense. My pulse quickened. Was she talking about a promotion? No, this was different. The air in the room felt thick now, like the walls were closing in. There was a price for this offer, something I was meant to understand, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. We know you're not happy with your current situation, Elliot. You're a smart guy, but you're stuck in a rut, and we think it's time for you to break free. We've got the resources, the connections, the power to make you more than just another cog in the machine. All you need to do is say yes. I stood frozen, my mind spinning. This was unreal. There was no way I was prepared for this. I had never felt more out of my depth in my life. Amara's eyes softened, but just barely. But before you say anything, know this, nothing comes free. If you want in, you'll have to prove you're ready. You'll have to prove you can handle it. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What had I gotten myself into? I stood there, in the middle of that strange, dimly lit room, the weight of their words pressing down on me. Marcus and Amara, two figures I had barely even acknowledged in my day-to-day life, were now standing in front of me, offering me a life I didn't even know I wanted. The words they spoke hung in the air like a heavy fog, clouding my judgment, making it harder to breathe. You're offering me what exactly? I asked, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. My brain was scrambling to make sense of this situation, to catch up with the reality of it all. Amara's lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She was too composed, too controlled. It was like she knew exactly what buttons to push to keep me on edge. We're offering you an opportunity, Elliot, to break out of the cycle, the monotony, to leave behind the predictable, safe life you've been living and step into something bigger. Bigger, I repeated, though it didn't make sense. I don't even know what you mean by that. What do you want from me? Marcus stepped closer, his gaze cold and calculating. We don't want anything from you, Elliot. We want you to want something. We want you to want power, influence, control. You're already in the right position for it. Your skills, your mind. You're the perfect candidate. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't some corporate promotion or a new project. This was something else entirely. I had always kept my head down, never seeking the limelight, and now I was being offered a chance to step into a world I didn't even know existed. A world where power wasn't just about climbing the corporate ladder. It was about playing the game on an entirely different level. But why me? I asked, my voice faltering slightly. There are plenty of other people at the company. Why did you pick me? Amara's eyes softened for a brief moment, almost imperceptibly. She took a step forward, her presence almost magnetic. Because you're more than you think, Elliot. You're smart, resourceful, and you've been overlooked for too long. We've been watching you, seeing how you solve problems, how you think. You're not like the others. She paused, letting the words sink in. You're capable of so much more. I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear churn in my stomach. I wasn't a naive person. I knew that nothing came without a price. The air in the room felt thick, like something was about to crack, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to see what it was. What's the catch? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Marcus chuckled darkly. Oh, there's always a catch. There's always a cost for power. But it's nothing you can't handle. The only question is whether you'll pay the price. I felt a wave of unease wash over me. I had always been the kind of person who played by the rules, who followed the straight path. But in that moment, something shifted. Maybe it was the allure of the unknown, or maybe it was the realization that I had been trapped in a life that felt increasingly empty. I had spent so long being content with mediocrity, thinking that was enough. But now, the idea of power, of influence, it was intoxicating. You'll need to prove yourself, Amara said suddenly, her tone shifting, becoming more serious. Prove that you can handle what we're offering. There's a task. A test, if you will. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment where everything changed. What kind of task? I asked, my voice tight. Marcus exchanged a glance with Amara, a silent understanding passing between them. A delicate one. One that requires a particular set of skills. Your skills, Elliot. Something only someone with your background could accomplish. If you succeed, you'll be one of us. You'll be part of something bigger. If you fail, well, let's just say the consequences won't be pleasant. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. The air felt even heavier now, suffocating almost. What's the task? Amara smiled, and for the first time, there was something almost predatory in her expression. It's simple, really. There's a person in the company who's become a liability. Someone whose presence is becoming more of a problem than it's worth. You'll need to neutralize that problem, Elliot. Quietly, without drawing attention. The words hung in the air, thick with implications. Neutralize? I wasn't sure if I had heard her correctly. Was she asking me to, what? To ruin someone's career? To destroy their reputation? I looked at her, trying to read her expression. There was no sign of hesitation in her eyes, no trace of remorse. She was serious. I shook my head, trying to process what she had just said. Neutralize, you mean? You know exactly what I mean, she interrupted, her voice cold, almost clinical. You're smart enough to understand the implications of what we're offering. We want you to make a problem disappear. Quietly. Efficiently. I stood there, frozen. My mind was reeling. I had been offered the kind of power I had never imagined, but at what cost? How far was I willing to go to escape the life I had? Was I really prepared to cross that line? For a moment, I thought about walking away, but I didn't. Something inside me, something I didn't want to acknowledge, was pulling me toward this opportunity. The temptation was too great. What's the next step? I asked before I could stop myself. Amara's smile returned, but it wasn't a comforting one. It was a smile that said she knew something I didn't. You'll be contacted soon. Someone will give you the details of the job. You'll know what to do. And once you do it, you'll be one of us. But remember, Elliot, there's no turning back. Once you're in, there's no getting out. I swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling in. There was no going back. Are you ready to make your choice? Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. I took a deep breath. The world I had known was already slipping away, and I was being pulled into something darker, more dangerous. I didn't know what would happen next, but I was about to find out. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss, knowing that the only way forward was to jump. I stood there, caught in a web I had willingly stepped into but couldn't seem to unravel. The weight of their words, heavy and cold, pressed down on me like a physical force. There was no going back, no escaping the pull of this new world they had shown me. I had made a decision, whether I realized it or not. The offer was too tempting, too dangerous, and too perfect in its own twisted way. Remember, Elliot, Amara's voice broke through my thoughts, her tone colder now, almost businesslike. This task isn't something you can take lightly. The stakes are high. You don't get second chances. You either succeed or you don't. And if you fail, there's no safety net. You'll be on your own, and trust me, that's not a position you want to be in. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I had known that whatever they wanted from me wouldn't come without consequences, but I hadn't quite understood the gravity of it all until now. This wasn't just about career advancement or playing some game. This was real. I was about to step into something that had no guarantees, no rules. A world where everything was on the line. Marcus stood silently behind her, his eyes scanning me with a calculated precision that made my skin crawl. There was no warmth in him, no empathy. He was all business, all power. I couldn't even tell if he was enjoying this. But then, I realized, maybe he didn't care. It was all just another move in a game I didn't even understand. Amara broke the silence again, her gaze fixed on me, almost as if she were daring me to back out. We'll be in touch, Elliot. You'll receive further instructions. But let's make one thing clear. You're not just joining a group. You're becoming part of a system. A system that requires loyalty, discretion, and a willingness to get your hands dirty when necessary. If you're not ready for that, now's the time to walk away. My throat went dry. I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell them that I wasn't that kind of person. I wasn't a ruthless manipulator. I wasn't cold-blooded enough to play their game. But deep down, I knew I wasn't in a position to walk away. I had already made the choice. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the deep-seated need to feel like I mattered in a world that had never given me that validation. I'm ready, I found myself saying, almost before I could process the words coming out of my mouth. Amara's lips curled into a satisfied smile. Good. That's what I wanted to hear. But remember, once you're in, there's no getting out. Your life won't be the same, Elliot. You'll have to make sacrifices. You'll have to walk away from the life you've known. I understand. I replied, my voice steadier now, though my heart was racing. Marcus stepped forward, his eyes never leaving mine. You'll receive a call within the next 24 hours. The job will be simple enough, but remember this, timing is everything. Don't overthink it. Don't hesitate. If you do, the window will close, and you'll lose your chance. I nodded, though every fiber of my being screamed for me to back out, to run from the darkness that was now slowly surrounding me. But I didn't. There was something pulling me forward, something I couldn't explain. I couldn't leave now. Not after everything they had shown me. Not after all the promises of power, influence, and control. Amara moved toward the door, signaling the end of the conversation. You'll find the details on your phone soon. But for now, consider this a test of your commitment. You'll be judged on your actions, Elliot, not your words. With that, they both turned and left the room, the door clicking shut behind them. I was alone again, but this time, it felt different. The silence was oppressive, suffocating even. I stood there for a moment, trying to collect my thoughts, but everything felt like a blur. What had I just agreed to? What had I gotten myself into? I walked over to the small table in the corner of the room and sat down, my mind racing. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing for sure. My life was never going to be the same. I checked my phone. There was nothing there yet. I stared at the blank screen for what felt like an eternity. Had I made a mistake? Was I being manipulated into something I wasn't prepared for? The weight of the decision hung heavy on my shoulders. I wasn't the kind of person who sought out conflict. I wasn't the type to make waves. But for the first time, I realized that my entire life had been one long, quiet wave of mediocrity. This was my chance to break free, to be someone who mattered, to finally be someone. I could feel the pull growing stronger, like an invisible thread that tied me to this new reality. There was no going back now. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. The message was short and to the point. Your task begins tomorrow. Details to follow. Don't fail. It was signed only with a number. No name. No further explanation. I swallowed, feeling a chill run through me. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. Or perhaps the moment I had been dreading. The next 24 hours would change everything. Whether I was ready or not, I had stepped into a world that had no rules, no mercy, and no turning back. The message sat there on my phone screen like a ticking bomb. The words were simple, direct, but their impact hit me like a punch to the gut. Your task begins tomorrow. Details to follow. Don't fail. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every breath, every movement felt like I was being scrutinized from the shadows, like my life had been flipped upside down in a single moment, and now I was part of a game I didn't understand. A game where the rules were hazy, but the consequences were anything but. The hours leading up to that night felt endless. I barely slept, the darkness of my apartment pressing in on me as I stared at the ceiling, wondering what I had gotten myself into. I thought about my family, my friends, if they even counted as friends, and the life I had so carefully constructed. Would I ever see it again? Would I even want to? I tried to brush off the unease, to convince myself that this was just a step toward something better, that I was doing this for a reason. But the doubts kept creeping in. Amara's words echoed in my mind. There's no turning back. Was I prepared to live with the consequences of that choice? The next morning came too quickly. I had barely slept, and my head was pounding from the stress, but I dragged myself through the motions of getting ready. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on me with every step I took. I hadn't received any further instructions, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. I spent the entire day in a haze, my mind constantly flicking back to the message. Was I supposed to go to work as usual? Was I supposed to wait? And if so, wait for what? Finally, as the clock hit late afternoon, the phone buzzed again. This time, the message was different. It wasn't a vague command. It was a specific location, an address, and a time. Meet at 6 p.m., same place as before. I didn't hesitate. My body moved almost on autopilot, pulling me toward the address, the weight of the decision pulling harder with every passing minute. The streets felt different as I walked toward the meeting point, like I wasn't just walking to a physical location, but to a moment that would change everything. I thought I had prepared myself for whatever lay ahead, but the closer I got, the more I realized that I hadn't even begun to understand the kind of world I was stepping into. I arrived early, lingering in the shadows near the door, my breath shallow as I waited. The area was quiet, too quiet for my liking. There was no sign of anyone, but I could feel something was off. The anticipation gnawed at me, making my hands shake slightly as I fumbled with my phone. The task hadn't even started, and yet the pressure was suffocating. At 5:55, I saw the door crack open, and a figure stepped out. It wasn't Amara or Marcus. This was someone new, someone I didn't recognize. The man was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his face unreadable as he approached me without a word. "Elliot," he said simply, his voice low and smooth, like he was accustomed to delivering bad news. I nodded, still not sure if I should speak, but knowing that whatever was about to happen, I was already in too deep. He handed me an envelope, plain and unmarked. "This is for you. Do exactly as the instructions say. No deviations. If you do, there will be consequences. You understand?" I took the envelope, my fingers brushing against his for a brief second. It was cold, like the man himself. I didn't say anything. I just nodded, too afraid to do anything else. He turned and walked back into the building without another word, leaving me standing there alone on the street with the envelope in my hand. I could feel my pulse quicken as I tore it open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, the instructions typed neatly, but without any explanation. The words were direct. "Get close to Jessica Brown. She is the target. You have 1 week. Be careful. Do not attract attention." I stared at the paper for a moment, letting the words sink in. Jessica Brown. I didn't know her personally, but I had seen her around. She was a senior manager in the company, always surrounded by a small group of colleagues, always impeccably put together, always in control. She didn't seem like the kind of person who would be a target, whatever that meant. But I wasn't in a position to question orders. I was just a pawn in this game, and I had to play by the rules, no matter how much I hated it. The rest of the instructions were equally cryptic, detailing a series of steps to get close to Jessica without making her suspicious. It was a game of manipulation, of subtlety, of becoming someone she could trust, someone she wouldn't see as a threat. And once that trust was established, whatever came next, I wasn't sure, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. My head was spinning. I had no idea how I was supposed to do this. How do you even get close to someone like Jessica? Someone so far removed from the world I knew. Someone who probably had no idea I even existed. But it didn't matter. This was my task, and I had no choice but to follow through. The thought of backing out, of running away, crossed my mind for just a second, but I pushed it away. This was it. This was my moment to break free. The only question was, what would I become once I did? As I made my way back to my apartment, my mind raced. I needed to come up with a plan, a strategy. I couldn't afford to screw this up. The phone buzzed again, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a new message from an unknown number. "You've made the right choice, Elliot. But remember, there are no second chances. You'll either succeed or be eliminated. Make sure you understand that." My stomach twisted into knots. Eliminated. The word felt too cold, too final. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about survival. And the game had only just begun. The weight of the message from the unknown number still hung in the air like a dark cloud as I made my way back to my apartment. The words replayed in my mind, over and over. You'll either succeed or be eliminated. It wasn't just the threat, it was the finality of it. Eliminated. There was no room for mistakes. No second chances. I could feel my pulse quicken with every step. When I reached my apartment, I immediately locked the door behind me. I hadn't been this aware of my surroundings in years. The simple act of walking back to my own place now felt like an audacious risk, like at any moment, someone could be watching, waiting. I threw myself onto the couch, staring at the envelope again. It felt heavier now, as if it were holding the key to something much bigger than I had realized. But what was the next move? The instructions were so bare, so cold. Get close to Jessica Brown. Make her trust me. But how? She was a senior manager. I had seen her in passing a few times at the office, always impeccably dressed, always commanding a certain respect from those around her. She didn't seem like someone who would even notice someone like me. How was I supposed to worm my way into her life, into her trust, without drawing attention? The thought alone sent a chill through me. I wasn't cut out for this. For the first time, I seriously considered walking away. I could just throw the envelope away, forget everything that had happened. But then I remembered the consequences. Eliminated. That phrase, so simple and blunt, settled in my chest like a weight. I couldn't back out. Not now. The only option left was to move forward. I had no idea what I was doing, no idea where this would lead, but the fear of what would happen if I failed was enough to keep me moving. I needed to find out who Jessica Brown was. I needed to understand how she worked, how she thought. I spent the rest of the evening on the computer, trying to dig up whatever I could on her. A quick search turned up some basic information. Jessica Brown was 35, sharp, and well-respected in her field. She had a reputation for being a no-nonsense manager who expected nothing less than perfection from her team. It seemed like she was untouchable, too polished, too professional. But that didn't matter. The task was simple, and yet it was complicated by the nature of the woman I was supposed to approach. I needed to find her weaknesses, figure out how I could become a part of her life without her suspecting a thing. As the hours passed, I found myself obsessing over the smallest details. Her social media profiles were sparse, but there were a few pictures, nothing revealing, just a glimpse of her life outside the office. A few friends, a couple of family photos. She didn't seem like the type to open up easily, to trust people quickly, which made my task that much harder. The clock ticked closer to midnight. I was exhausted, but I couldn't stop. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that Jessica wasn't just some high-level employee I could bypass. She was smart, strategic, and seemingly impenetrable. If I was going to get close to her, it would take more than just a few casual conversations in the break room. I needed to be patient. I needed to play the long game. The next morning, I arrived at work with a new focus. I had always kept to myself in the office, just another face in the crowd, not one to engage in office politics or try to climb the corporate ladder. But today, I couldn't afford to stay invisible. I had to blend in, to find a way to catch Jessica's attention without appearing desperate. I kept my distance, letting the day unfold around me as usual, but my mind was on her, on the task at hand. It was just after lunch when I saw her. Jessica was standing by the elevator, talking to a few colleagues. She was poised, graceful, but there was something else there, something I hadn't noticed before. There was a slight tension in her posture, a hint of something. Guarded. I stood just out of earshot, observing her. I noticed the way she spoke to people, the directness in her voice, how she never wasted time with pleasantries. She was efficient, sharp, and didn't tolerate nonsense. But there was something else, something deeper. She was alone in a sea of people, always holding herself apart, like she was in control, but also isolated from the world around her. It was subtle, but I could see it. The loneliness. Maybe that was my way in. Later that afternoon, I found myself walking toward the coffee machine, just as Jessica was on her way back to her office. I wasn't sure why I did it, but I decided to speak, to break the silence, to insert myself into her world, even if just for a moment. "Jessica," I said, my voice calm but purposeful. She stopped, turning to face me. Her gaze was sharp, assessing, like she was already sizing me up. "Elliot, right?" she asked, as if she had to remember my name. "What can I do for you?" I hadn't expected her to remember me, but there it was. She was sharp, too sharp for me to make a mistake. I had to be careful, calculated. "I just wanted to ask you about that project you were leading last quarter," I said, trying to sound casual, like I wasn't completely out of my depth. "I heard you managed it really well. How did you deal with the unexpected delays?" She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. "It's all about planning ahead," she said, her voice direct, almost to the point of being dismissive. "You anticipate problems before they arise. That's the key." I nodded, trying to keep the conversation going, but I could already sense the wall she was putting up. She wasn't giving me anything. Not yet. "I get that," I said, forcing a smile. "It must be hard to keep everything under control, though, with the way things move so fast around here." She didn't answer right away, just looked at me for a long moment. And then, as if deciding I was worth a brief moment of her time, she said, "It's not hard when you don't let people get in your way. That's how you stay on top." It was a cryptic statement, but it told me everything I needed to know. She didn't trust easily, but she was willing to open up, just a little, if you pushed the right buttons. I smiled again, though it felt more like a mask now, one I had to wear for this task. "I'll keep that in mind." She gave me a brief nod, her eyes narrowing as if assessing whether I was genuinely interested or just another office drone trying to climb the ladder. Then she turned and walked away without another word. I watched her go, and for the first time, I had a glimmer of hope. The first step had been taken. The door had opened, just a crack. But now, I had to figure out how to slip through it. The following days passed in a blur of carefully calculated moves and subtle observations. Each moment felt like I was playing a game of chess. Every word I said, every glance I gave, all were pieces being moved on a board I had barely begun to understand. Jessica Brown was everything I had expected and more. She was a fortress of control, a woman who made everyone around her feel small just by existing. But I had to admit, there was something oddly magnetic about her. Every time we crossed paths, I found myself drawn to her in a way that I hadn't anticipated. Maybe it was the challenge. Maybe it was the way she held herself, like a queen surrounded by pawns, untouchable, always in control. I had learned a lot just by observing her from a distance. Jessica didn't engage in idle chatter. She was all business, all the time. She didn't seem to have much of a personal life, at least not one that she was willing to share. She didn't have the warm, open demeanor that other managers had. In fact, it was like she was deliberately distant, as if her world was something she wasn't willing to share with anyone. It wasn't until the third day that I began to see a crack in her armor. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. It happened in the break room. I was making coffee, minding my own business, when she walked in. She didn't notice me at first. She was too preoccupied with her phone, eyes glued to the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. I had been trying to think of a way to approach her without coming off as desperate, but nothing had felt right. But this moment, this was different. This was the opportunity one had been waiting for. I cleared my throat, just loud enough to get her attention, but not enough to make it obvious. When she looked up, her eyes narrowed slightly, but the expression on her face was softer, less guarded. For a brief moment, she looked like she was about to say something, but instead, she simply put the phone down and gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Elliot," she said, her voice neutral but not unfriendly. "What's on your mind?" I was surprised by how quickly I jumped into action. "I was just thinking about the last project you led, the one with the new software integration. It was impressive how smoothly it went." She raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by my interest, but there was still something guarded about her. "Impressive? I wouldn't call it that. We're still working out some bugs." "Really?" I said, trying to sound casual, leaning slightly forward. "From what I've seen, it seems like you had it under control. Must be great to have that kind of expertise on your team." She studied me for a moment, as if deciding whether or not I was genuinely interested or just another colleague trying to kiss up. Then, almost imperceptibly, she softened. "We've got a good team, but it's always a challenge. We're still refining things, figuring out the best way forward." This was the opening I needed. I had to keep the conversation going, but in a way that didn't make her think I was just another office drone looking to gain favor. I had to make it seem natural. So, I asked something I had been thinking about for days. "You ever feel like it's all too much? Like you're constantly fighting to stay ahead of the game?" Her expression shifted slightly, a brief flicker of vulnerability passing through her eyes before it was quickly masked by her usual steely composure. "It's part of the job," she said, almost too quickly. "You either keep up or you get left behind. But that's how I like it." I could see the change in her then. She wasn't giving me much, but she was starting to open up in her own way. The cracks in her armor were getting wider. I could tell that, like everyone else, she had her own fears, her own insecurities. She wasn't the unshakable tower I had assumed her to be. There was a chink in her armor, and I had found it. As we stood there, the moment stretched on, but it was clear that I had reached a critical juncture. I wasn't just some faceless colleague anymore. I had gotten under her skin, even if it was just a little. I could feel it. I could feel the shift. But I couldn't stop there. I had to push further. I had to get closer. "Do you ever wish you could just leave all this behind?" I asked, my voice softer now, as if I were asking a personal question instead of discussing work. She blinked, surprised by the direction of the conversation. Her walls went up again, her posture straightening as she took a step back, but there was something about her that seemed uncertain. I had caught her off guard, and for the first time, I saw that she didn't have all the answers. "Leave it behind," she repeated, her voice guarded now. I don't have that luxury, Elliot. I understand, I said quickly, trying to ease the tension. I just meant, sometimes it feels like we're all just spinning in circles. You know? There was a long pause, and I could feel the air thickening between us. It was as if time had stopped, and in that moment, I saw her for what she truly was. A woman who was so good at controlling everything that she had lost control of herself. The cracks were there, but she wasn't willing to let anyone see them. I don't have time for this, she said, her voice cool again as she reached for her coffee cup, signaling the end of our conversation. I have work to do. I nodded, stepping back, but I didn't feel defeated. Quite the opposite. I had seen something in her, something vulnerable, something human. And that was enough. I wasn't going to rush this. I wasn't going to push too hard, too fast. I had learned my first lesson. Jessica Brown wasn't someone you could break with a single conversation. But I had planted the seed. And with time, that seed would grow. As she walked out of the break room, I watched her go, a sense of satisfaction settling in my chest. I wasn't just another faceless colleague to her anymore. I was something else. Something important. But the hardest part was still ahead. Getting close to her was one thing. Gaining her trust? That was something else entirely. I needed to be patient. I needed to play the long game. But for the first time since I had accepted this task, I felt like I was actually getting somewhere. Weeks had passed, each one a delicate dance between me and Jessica. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but with each encounter, I learned more. She had let her guard down just enough for me to start seeing pieces of her, small glimpses of vulnerability beneath the hard shell she had carefully constructed. I wasn't sure if she realized it, but she was slowly, almost imperceptibly, letting me in. The task I had been given wasn't just about manipulation. It was about understanding. It was about connecting on a level deeper than just the surface. And as the days wore on, I found myself not just following orders, but genuinely seeing Jessica for who she was. A woman who had built her life around control, around success, but who was secretly struggling with the very things she held most dear. But even so, the weight of my initial decision, of the promise I had made to the people who had given me this task, loomed over me. There were moments when I felt the deep pull to walk away, to forget about the game I had been thrust into. I had been given a chance at something greater, but at what cost? What was I really willing to sacrifice? One day, everything came to a head. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even something I could have expected. I was sitting at my desk, lost in my thoughts, when Jessica walked in. She didn't knock, didn't ask to come in. She just stepped through the door like she had something to say. And this time, there was no business agenda behind it. Elliot, she began, her voice softer than usual, almost as if she had hesitated before speaking. I've been thinking about our conversations, about what you said, about how sometimes it feels like we're just going in circles. I was caught off guard, unsure of where this was headed. My heart skipped a beat. Yeah. She stepped further into the room, her posture a little less rigid, like she was finally ready to drop some of the walls she had so carefully built around herself. You were right. I've been so focused on work, on success, that I haven't really looked at what matters. I haven't really lived. The words hung in the air, heavy but not uncomfortable. I knew this was the moment. I had the power to push, to take advantage of this openness, but for the first time, I didn't want to. I think we all get caught up in that sometimes, I said, my voice steady but genuine. We get so busy doing, we forget to just be. Her eyes softened, and for a moment, she didn't look like the powerful manager or the unshakable professional. She just looked like a woman who had been carrying the weight of the world alone for too long. And in that moment, I saw her, not as a target, not as a task, but as a person, just like me. I've been pushing people away, she admitted, almost in a whisper. I don't know why. I've built this wall around me, and I think I'm scared to let anyone in. But you see me, don't you? I nodded, feeling something stir deep inside me. This wasn't about the game anymore. This wasn't about manipulating her for my own gain. This was about real connection, a bond that went beyond the task I had been given. You don't have to do this alone, I said softly, stepping closer. You don't have to be perfect. None of us are. She looked at me for a long moment, as if considering my words, and then, for the first time since I had known her, she smiled. It wasn't a business smile, a smile that was meant to charm or control. It was a real smile, a smile that said she trusted me. I think you're right, she said, her voice finally lighter. Maybe I've been running from the wrong things. And just like that, the game I had been playing, the manipulation, the deception, felt meaningless. It wasn't about taking something from her anymore. It wasn't about winning. It was about letting go of the fear that had held us both captive. It was about the truth. Over the next few weeks, Jessica began to change. Slowly but surely, she let people in. She started trusting her team more, reaching out to others when she needed help. And I found myself less focused on the task I had been given, less driven by the idea of power or influence. I was starting to understand that maybe what I needed most wasn't success or control, but real human connection. Eventually, I did something I hadn't thought possible. I told her the truth. I wasn't entirely honest with you, I said one afternoon, after we'd spent some time talking about her latest project. I wasn't just here to talk about work. I was sent to get close to you, to manipulate you, to make you trust me. Her face fell, the brief flicker of shock passing across her features. But then she did something I didn't expect. She didn't react with anger or betrayal. She didn't shut me out. Instead, she nodded. I had a feeling, she said quietly. But I think, maybe you needed to see the person behind the mask, too. Maybe we both did. And with that, the game was over. There was no more manipulation, no more fear of failure. We weren't playing each other anymore. We were just two people, flawed, uncertain, but willing to be real with each other. I didn't know what the future held, whether I'd remain a part of this world of shadows or whether I'd walk away. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a choice. And that was enough. In the end, it wasn't about power or influence or the game I had been drawn into. It was about understanding, about realizing that sometimes the most difficult tasks are the ones that bring us closer to the truth of who we really are. And with Jessica, I had found that truth. The journey had started with manipulation and deception, but it ended with something far more meaningful. For the first time, I felt free. And that was the real victory.